There is a man in a small village in the mountains of northern Greece in the year 1952 who has never seen a photograph. His name is Alexandros. He is 53 years old, a shepherd, literate enough to read the Bible and not much else. One afternoon, a foreign journalist passes through and hands him a photograph, a black and white image of a mountain range. Alexandros holds it, turns it, brings it close to his face, and then does something the journalist does not expect. He hands it back and says, quietly, that he cannot see what it is. Not that he cannot recognize the specific mountains, he cannot perceive the image at all. To his eyes, it is not a picture of anything. It is a collection of gray smudges on paper. The journalist is stunned, but the scientist is not. Because the scientist knows something that most people never pause to consider. Something so fundamental that if you truly absorbed it, if it actually settled into your bones and became part of how you move through your days, it would permanently alter your relationship to everything you think you know. Your brain has never shown you the world. Not once, not even for a single moment of your entire life. What it has shown you, what it shows you right now, as these words pass through the architecture of your mind, is a model, a construction, a magnificent, constantly updated, breathtakingly detailed simulation of reality that your brain assembles from fragments of electrical signal, layers of evolutionary assumption, and a kind of deep unconscious storytelling that has been going on since before you were born. The world you experience, the blue of the sky, the weight of grief, the smell of rain on hot pavement, the way a melody can make you feel something for which there are no words. None of that exists out there in the universe the way you think it does. None of it has the qualities you assign to it. The redness of red, the warmth of warmth, the solidity of the table you might be resting your hands on right now. These are not properties of the external world. They are properties of you. They are the brain's translation, its interpretation, its guess, its rendering, of signals that are in their raw form utterly silent and utterly dark. Out there, beyond the skin of your body, there is no color, there is no sound, there is no smell, no taste, no warmth, no cold. There is no beauty and there is no ugliness. There is only electromagnetic radiation moving at various frequencies, pressure waves propagating through molecular chains, chemical gradients, temperature differentials, a universe of pure, austere, information-dense physics that carries not a single quality your conscious mind would recognize. And yet, here you are, tasting coffee, hearing music, watching light fall through a window, and thinking it is beautiful. Your brain performed all of that, every last bit of it, and it did so without asking your permission, without informing you it was happening, and without leaving you any reliable way to check its work. This is not a comfortable idea, I understand that. Some people hear it and feel a kind of vertigo, as though the floor has shifted. Others reject it immediately. It feels too extreme, too nihilistic, too much like the sort of thing you might say late at night when you're being deliberately provocative. Of course red is red, of course pain hurts, of course the world is real. I am not here to tell you the world is not real. I am here to tell you something far stranger. The world is real, and you have never seen it. What you have seen is your brain's best guess about what the world is like. And that guess, I want to show you, is so different from the underlying reality that if you could somehow perceive that reality directly, unfiltered, unprocessed, stripped of every layer of biological interpretation your nervous system applies, you would not recognize it. You could not recognize it. Because you are not built to perceive reality, you are built to survive it. And those two things are not the same. The shepherd in Greece who could not see the photograph was not stupid, he was not primitive. He was simply operating with a brain that had never learned to decode that particular symbolic medium, the flattened grayscale representation of three-dimensional space. And so his visual system, receiving the raw input from the paper, had nothing to match it against, no model, no prior. And so it passed the information up the chain, and the higher levels of his mind said, essentially, I do not know what this is. I cannot make it into anything. And so he saw nothing. Now consider what this tells us. He looked at the same photons you or I would look at. The same wavelengths, the same intensities, the same patterns of light and dark. But his brain assembled no image because the brain does not receive images. The brain receives data and constructs images. The photograph is not an image until a brain makes it one. This is the thing that changes everything. Perception is not a window. It is a paintbrush. Let me take you further in. Let me tell you about the light. When you look at the sky and call it blue, what has happened? From the sun, that enormous hydrogen furnace 8 light minutes away, electromagnetic radiation travels to Earth at 300,000 kilometers per second. Some of those photons, scattered by the molecules of nitrogen and oxygen in our atmosphere, reach your eye at wavelengths of roughly 450 nanometers. They strike the cone cells at the back of your retina. Those cells generate electrochemical signals. Those signals travel through several layers of neurons, through the optic nerve, to the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus, and eventually to the primary visual cortex at the back of your brain. At each stage, the signal is processed, filtered, enhanced, compared against memories, matched against predictions, and at the end of this extraordinary chain of biological computation, your consciousness reports blue. But here is the question that should stop you cold. At which point in that journey did blue appear? The photons have no color. The electrochemical signals in your retina have no color. The action potentials firing through your optic nerve have no color. The neural activity in your visual cortex has no color. At no point in that chain of physical events is there anything we could point to and say, there. There is where the blue entered the process. Blue is not in the sky. Blue is in you. And yet, and here is the miracle, every human being who looks at the midday sky and has normal color vision sees the same blue, not the same physical quantity, the same qualia, the same experience. How is that possible if blue is a construction of the brain? The answer is as beautiful as it is humbling. We all share the same basic biological machinery. We all inherited the same cone cells, roughly the same visual cortex, the same evolutionary history. Our brains are running the same program. They generate the same blue from the same input because they are, in the deepest sense, the same kind of brain. But they are not identical. And so there is a question that has haunted philosophers and scientists for centuries, and for which we still have no complete answer. Do you see the same blue that I see? Not just the same frequency of light, the same experience of blue. When you look at the sky and I look at the sky and we both say blue, are we having the same inner experience? Or are we just using the same word for two different inner events, two different private sunsets, two different versions of blue that are perfectly correlated in their external references, but internally, privately, experientially different? We do not know. We cannot know with the tools we currently possess, because experience is the one thing in the universe that cannot be measured from the outside. This is called the hard problem of consciousness. And it was named hard not to be dramatic, but because it is genuinely, profoundly, perhaps irreducibly resistant to the methods of science that have otherwise carried us from the surface of the Earth to the outer solar system, from the atom to the quark, from infection to vaccination. The hard problem is not how does the brain process visual information. We are making genuine progress on that. The hard problem is, why does it feel like anything at all to process it? Why is there an experience of blue rather than just the information processing that produces the word blue? No one knows, and I find that extraordinary. In a century in which we have split the atom, decoded the genome, detected the gravitational ripples from colliding black holes a billion light years away, the most intimate fact of your existence, the fact that you experience things, the fact that there is something it is like to be you, remains at its core a mystery. But let us leave that mystery for a moment and return to the constructed world, because the color is only the beginning. Sound is not in the world either. Out in the universe, there are pressure waves, rhythmic compressions and rarefactions of air molecules, moving at roughly 340 meters per second at sea level. Those pressure waves have no sound. They have frequency and amplitude. Your ear translates those physical properties into neural signals. Your brain translates those neural signals into what you experience as music, as speech, as the crash of thunder, as the laughter of a child. The music is not in the air, the music is in you. Remove the ear, remove the nervous system, and there is only a pressure wave moving through molecules, meaning nothing. The forest does not fall silently when no one is there to hear it. It does not fall loudly either. It falls with no acoustic quality whatsoever. It creates a pressure wave. Whether that wave is beautiful or terrifying or silent is a question that can only be answered by a nervous system, and the nervous system must be present for the question to have meaning. Now let me tell you about time. If color is a construction and sound is a construction, time, your experience of time is perhaps the most audacious construction of all. Because time as you experience it does not flow, not in any physical sense. The equations of physics at the deepest level are almost entirely symmetrical with respect to time. If you filmed most physical processes and played the film backward, the laws of physics would still be satisfied. Time in the equations does not have a preferred direction. It is humans, it is consciousness that experiences time as flowing from past to future, as moving always in one direction, as carrying with it the qualitative sense of now, of the present moment, of things happening as opposed to things having happened or being about to happen. The physicist Lee Smolin and the philosopher Roberto Mangabeira Unger have argued that time's flow may be the most real thing in the universe, and that physics has been wrong to try to eliminate it. Others, like Julian Barber, argue the precise opposite, that time does not flow, that all moments exist simultaneously, and that the experience of flow is purely an artifact of how memory is embedded in each moment. Both of these positions are serious scientific and philosophical proposals defended by serious people. We do not know which is right. What we do know is that the experience of time is extraordinarily plastic, that it stretches when you are bored and compresses when you are engaged, that a second of acute terror can feel like a minute and an afternoon of joy can feel like a heartbeat, that in certain states, deep meditation, extreme danger, certain surgical anesthesia levels, the experience of time can disappear entirely. There are patients who have undergone procedures under incomplete anesthesia who report not that time passed strangely, but that there was no time at all between one moment and the next. Not a gap in memory, not a skipped record, a genuine subjective absence of duration. The clock on the wall ticks steadily. Your experience of its ticking is a story your brain is telling about those ticks, and the brain edits that story constantly, speeding it up, slowing it down, occasionally dropping entire chapters without your knowledge. There is something called the color phi phenomenon, discovered by the psychologist Paul Colors, that demonstrates this editing in a particularly startling way. If you flash a red dot on the left side of a screen, and then 50 milliseconds later flash a green dot on the right side of the screen, observers report seeing a single dot that moved from left to right and changed color in the middle of its journey. This is already strange enough, but the truly extraordinary part is this. The dot changes color before it reaches the position where the green dot will appear. The observer sees the color change happen mid-journey, but the green dot, which is what triggers the color change in their brain's model, has not appeared yet. Their brain retroactively altered their experience of the past to make it consistent with new information that arrived in the future. The brain is not just predicting the future, it is rewriting the past. Your experience of the present moment is not the present moment, it is the brain's most recent, edited version of recent events, assembled after the fact, made coherent, and delivered to consciousness with a false timestamp that says now. The neuroscientist Benjamin Libet performed experiments in the 1980s that remain some of the most philosophically disturbing data in the history of science. He found that when a person decides to move their wrist, the neural activity associated with that movement begins in the brain nearly half a second before the person reports being conscious of the decision to move. The brain starts preparing the action before the mind decides to act. Free will, if it exists, may not work the way you think it does. But let us pull back even further. Let us think about the nature of the information your brain is working with. Because what the brain is receiving every moment is not a complete picture of the world. It is a tiny, filtered, edited, pre-selected sliver of what is out there. And most of what is out there, your brain ignores completely. The human eye can only detect electromagnetic radiation within a narrow band of frequencies, roughly 400 to 700 nanometers. This is what we call visible light. But the electromagnetic spectrum extends from the extremely long wavelength radio waves, miles long, down to the unimaginably short wavelength gamma rays, with a wavelength smaller than an atomic nucleus. Our visible light occupies less than 1/10 trillionth of the full electromagnetic spectrum. The universe is broadcasting in 10 trillion channels, and we are tuned to one. Bees see ultraviolet light. What they see when they look at a flower is something you have never seen and cannot imagine, because imagining it would require a brain wired to process it, and yours is not. Mantis shrimp have 16 types of photoreceptors to our 3. What they perceive when they look at the world is not just more color, it is a different kind of seeing, a richer dimensionality of visual experience that our neurology does not support. We can describe it in words, we cannot have it. The world they inhabit, the sensory world, is not the same as ours, and neither of us is more right about what the world really looks like, because the world, as we said, looks like nothing at all without a brain to look at it. Pit vipers and certain other snakes perceive infrared radiation. They can see heat. The warm body of a mouse in a dark room is, to a rattlesnake, something like luminous. It glows with its own warmth. Electroreceptive fish like the electric eel sense the faint electrical fields produced by the muscles and nerves of other animals. Sharks and rays can detect the bioelectric fields of hidden prey buried in the seafloor. Migratory birds appear to sense the Earth's magnetic field, to perceive somehow the orientation of their bodies relative to the planet's electromagnetic structure. Each of these animals is not perceiving a different interpretation of one reality. Each is perceiving a different slice of that reality, filtered through a radically different biological instrument, constructing a radically different model of the world, and none of those models is the full truth. Not the snakes, not the mantis shrimps, not the birds, and not yours. The philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote a famous paper in 1974 titled, "What is it like to be a bat?" His argument was that a bat, navigating and perceiving its world through echolocation, through the echo of ultrasonic pulses bouncing off objects in the dark, is having an experience that is fundamentally inaccessible to us. Not just unfamiliar, inaccessible. Because experience is subjective, and the bat's experience is constituted by a sensory modality we do not possess and cannot imagine from the inside. We can describe the physics of echolocation, we can build sonar machines, we can measure what frequencies the bat emits and what echoes it receives, but what it feels like to navigate by sound in the dark, what the bat's world looks like from the inside, that, Nagel argued, we cannot know and never will. Now here is the question I want you to sit with. If the bat's experience is inaccessible to us, then what experience are we inaccessible to? What is it like to be a creature with 16 color channels perceiving our world? What is it like to sense a magnetic field? What forms of experience exist in the universe that we have not even imagined exist because we have no sensory apparatus to gesture toward them? The answer, I suspect, is many. Many more than we have dreamed of. The universe is 400 billion stars in our galaxy alone, and there are 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. Life, wherever it arose, and the evidence increasingly suggests it arises wherever the conditions permit, life that arose under different conditions, around different stars, in different chemistries, with different evolutionary pressures, would have developed different perceptual instruments, would have built different models of reality, would be inhabiting right now different experiential worlds. And all of those worlds, all of those private, internally consistent, evolutionarily functional models would be wrong in the same way ours is wrong. Not wrong in the sense of useless, not wrong in the sense of random, but wrong in the sense of partial, in the sense of incomplete, in the sense of optimized for survival rather than optimized for truth. This brings me to something I consider one of the most quietly radical ideas in modern cognitive science. It comes from the work of Donald Hoffman, a cognitive scientist at the University of California, Irvine, who has spent decades working through what he calls the interface theory of perception. Hoffman's argument, which is formally rigorous, he has published the underlying game-theoretic mathematics, is this: evolution does not favor accurate perceptions of reality. It favors perceptions that maximize fitness, and fitness and accuracy are not the same thing. In fact, in his models, when organisms compete for resources, those that perceive reality accurately are consistently outcompeted by those that perceive fitness payoffs directly, ignoring the underlying structure of reality entirely. He gives an analogy. Consider the icons on your computer's desktop, the little blue folder you click to access your documents. That folder is not the reality of what is happening in the computer. The reality is billions of transistors switching at billions of times per second, representing voltages and quantum states, executing machine code. The folder is a useful interface, a simplified, perceptually accessible representation that allows you to interact productively with a system whose true operation you would be unable to engage with directly. The interface hides the reality. And this is by design. It makes you more productive precisely because it hides the truth. Hoffman argues that perception is exactly this: an interface designed by evolution not to show you the world, but to show you a simplified, action-guiding model that lets you navigate and reproduce. The apple on the tree is not red to alert you to an objective property of the fruit. The redness is a fitness signal, a notation in your interface that says, here is a resource, caloric value, reach for it. An organism that actually perceived the underlying molecular structure of the apple, its quantum mechanical reality, the full physical truth of what it is, would be so overwhelmed by irrelevant information that it would starve before it figured out how to eat. We perceive the icons, not the underlying computation. And the icons, while useful, are not real in the way the computation is real. Now, I want to be careful here because this is where people sometimes misunderstand, sometimes deliberately distort these ideas. This does not mean that reality is not real. It does not mean that anything goes, or that your beliefs are as valid as the laws of physics, or that science is merely one perspective among many. The reality underneath the interface is real. The quantum fields, the molecular structures, the electromagnetic radiation, those are real. They are not experiences, they are not perceptions, but they are there, independent of any mind, obeying their own deep and elegant laws. Science is our best attempt to understand that underlying reality directly, to go beneath the interface, to see the computation rather than the icons. And it has done so with extraordinary success. It revealed that the Earth is not flat, not the center of the universe, not 6,000 years old. It revealed that the species were not fixed but evolved, that the atom is not solid but is almost entirely empty space, that the solid table I described you resting your hands on is at the deepest level almost entirely void, held together by electromagnetic forces between clouds of probability. These discoveries are real discoveries. They are not merely different perspectives. They are corrections of the interface by the underlying computation, but they are also profoundly uncomfortable for the intuitive mind. Because the intuitive mind, the conscious mind, the mind that experiences the world through the interface, is deeply committed to the interface. It experiences the table as solid. It experiences the floor as flat. It experiences time as flowing. These are not errors exactly. They are simplifications that work brilliantly in the scale of everyday life. The table will not let your hand pass through it, and for all practical purposes, that is what matters. But they are not the deep truth. And one of the great projects of human intellectual life has been the slow, uncomfortable, magnificent process of peeling back the interface to see what is really there. Copernicus did this for space. Darwin did this for life. Einstein did this for time and gravity. Quantum mechanics did this for matter. And what each of these revolutions found beneath the intuitive interface was something stranger, more beautiful, and more humbling than the interface had suggested. Let me tell you something about matter, because matter the physical stuff of the world, the thing you are most convinced is solid and real and simply there, matter is perhaps the greatest illustration of all of how different reality is from the model your brain presents. You are made of atoms. Every cell in your body, every bone, every neural pathway through which these ideas are now passing, atoms. And atoms, as you probably know, are mostly empty space. The nucleus of an atom, where most of the mass lives, is roughly 100,000 times smaller than the atom itself. If the atom were the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be a marble at the center field. The electrons orbit, if orbit is even the right word, which it really is not, because quantum mechanics tells us that electrons do not travel in defined paths, but exist in probability clouds, in superpositions of possible positions that collapse into specific positions only when measured. The electrons, such as they are, occupy the vast emptiness around that tiny marble. You are not solid. You are almost entirely nothing. The sensation of solidity, of the table pushing back against your hand, of your shoes against the floor, is the electromagnetic repulsion between the electron clouds of the atoms in your hand and the atoms in the table. The table does not push back because it is solid. It pushes back because the forces between its atoms and the atoms of your hand repel each other before they ever make true contact. You have never touched anything, not in the deepest physical sense. The distance between the atoms on your skin and the atoms of every object you have ever held is small, but it is not zero. None of this undermines the ordinary experience of touching. It is just that the ordinary experience of touching is an interface, a compressed, action-guiding summary of a physical process that is far stranger than the feeling of contact suggests. Now let me tell you about the predictive brain. Because there is a revolution currently underway in neuroscience that I think is one of the most important ideas of the 21st century, and most people have not heard of it. It is called predictive processing, or sometimes the Bayesian brain hypothesis, and its leading architects include the neuroscientist Carl Friston, the philosopher Andy Clark, and others. The central claim is this: the brain is not primarily a processor of sensory information. It is primarily a prediction machine. Here is how it works. Your brain, at every moment, is running an internal model of the world, a hypothesis about what is out there, what is causing the signals arriving at your sense organs. Rather than passively receiving sensory data and then building a perception from the bottom up, the brain is actively predicting what the sensory data should look like if its current model is correct, and then comparing those predictions against the actual incoming data. What gets passed up to consciousness is not the raw data. What gets passed up is the prediction error, the gap between what the brain expected and what it actually received. The brain, in other words, is not hearing sounds and building music. It is predicting music and then updating its prediction based on the sounds. It is not seeing light and building a face. It is predicting a face and then checking whether the light confirms it. This has staggering implications. It means that most of what you experience, most of the time, is not coming from outside at all. It is coming from inside, from the brain's own predictive model, updated by incoming data but largely self-generated. The neuroscientist Anil Seth at the University of Sussex calls conscious experience a controlled hallucination. Not a hallucination in the pejorative sense, not a malfunction, but a hallucination in the precise sense, a perception generated from within, shaped by the external world, but not simply read from it. The difference between ordinary perception and what we clinically call hallucination is not that one comes from the world and the other from the mind. Both come, ultimately, from the mind. The difference is a matter of control, of how strongly the incoming sensory data constrains the internal model. In ordinary perception, the model is tightly constrained by sensory input. In hallucination, the model runs freer, less anchored. But the underlying process, the brain generating an experience from its own internal architecture and then checking it against the world, is the same in both cases. You are always hallucinating. Waking life is just the most stable, best constrained version of the hallucination. Dreams are what happens when you remove the external constraint almost entirely. The brain cut off from sensory input by sleep, runs its predictive model on its own with only the weak input of memory and emotional state to shape it, and what it generates can be indistinguishable from the inside, from waking experience. The room you dream in feels as solid as the room you wake in. The people in your dreams feel as real as the people in your life. The emotions you feel in dreams are real emotions. Your heart rate changes, your amygdala activates, your body responds. What does this tell us? It tells us that the brain's capacity for generating convincing experience does not depend on the external world. The external world is the calibration signal. When that signal is strong, the hallucination is reliably controlled. When that signal is absent, the hallucination runs free. And in neither case is what you experience the underlying reality. In both cases, it is the model. There is a hole in your vision right now, a real physical hole. At the point where the optic nerve attaches to the retina, the region called the optic disc, there are no photoreceptors at all. Every human eye has a blind spot covering roughly 15 degrees of visual angle, where there is simply no light detection occurring. You should experience a dark blotch in your visual field, always, everywhere you look. You do not because your brain fills it in, seamlessly, automatically, without your knowledge. It generates a plausible continuation of whatever pattern surrounds the blind spot and inserts that generated content into your experience. You are, at this moment, looking at something your brain invented. Not noticed? That is the point. It is invisible to you because the brain presents its fabrication as reality and gives you no flag, no indication, no watermark to identify the manufactured content. Now let me ask you a question that I suspect you have never been asked before, not quite this way. If the brain is generating experience rather than receiving it, if perception is prediction rather than detection, then what happens when the brain's predictions are systematically wrong? What happens when the model fails? This is what happens in certain neurological conditions that reveal by their failure the mechanics of the construction. Consider the strange phenomenon called Anton syndrome, in which a person who has been cortically blinded, whose visual cortex has been damaged so that the brain receives no useful visual information, not only cannot see, but genuinely does not know they cannot see. They confabulate. They describe the room they are in based on their previous knowledge and expectation. They claim to see things that are not there, not in the way a hallucinating person might, but with complete calm and conviction, as if reporting a simple fact. Their brain continues to generate visual experience, continues to predict what the world should look like, because the machinery for flagging the absence of sensory input is itself compromised. The model runs without the calibration signal and presents its outputs to consciousness with full confidence. They are not lying. They genuinely experience seeing. They are just experiencing a brain that has lost contact with the world but has not noticed. Is this so different from what all of us are doing? Not lost contact, certainly, not to that degree, but all of us are experiencing brains that run on models rather than raw data, that fill in blind spots without flagging them, that generate time rather than perceive it, that construct color from wavelengths that have no color. We are all, to some degree, Anton syndrome patients who happen to have a well-calibrated signal. Now let me take you somewhere even stranger, because everything I have described so far, the construction of color, the prediction machine, the controlled hallucination, all of this operates at the level of individual experience. But there is a deeper layer, a layer that science entered in the early 20th century, and from which it has never entirely returned, because what it found there was a reality so unlike ordinary experience that it permanently fractured the comfortable assumption that the world behaves like a larger version of the world we see. I'm talking about quantum mechanics. The standard model of quantum mechanics, specifically the Copenhagen interpretation, developed by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg in the late 1920s, and still the most widely used framework for doing quantum calculations, holds that before a quantum system is measured, it does not have definite properties. An electron does not have a definite position, a definite momentum, a definite spin. It has instead a probability distribution across all possible positions. momenta, spins. The wave function, which is the mathematical description of the quantum state, is not a description of ignorance, of a definite reality we just haven't measured yet. It is, according to this interpretation, a complete description of the physical situation. And the physical situation is one of irreducible indeterminacy. When a measurement occurs, when the system interacts with a measuring device, or in some formulations, when the system interacts with a conscious observer, the wave function collapses. The range of possibilities narrows to one actuality. The electron has a position now. The spin is determined now, not discovered, determined. The measurement does not reveal a pre-existing fact, it creates it. Einstein hated this. He spent the last decades of his life trying to show that quantum mechanics was incomplete, that there must be hidden variables, definite underlying properties that we just cannot see, making the apparent randomness merely apparent. He and Bohr debated it over years, the most famous sustained intellectual argument in the history of physics, conducted with deep mutual respect and the full rigor of two of the greatest scientific minds of the century. Einstein could not accept that God plays dice, as he put it. Bohr's reply was something like, "Einstein, stop telling God what to do." John Bell, in 1964, derived a mathematical inequality that could, in principle, determine who was right. And the subsequent decades of experiment, culminating in the Nobel Prize-winning work of Alan Aspect, John Clauser, and Anton Zeilinger, awarded in 2022, have decisively shown that Einstein was wrong. The universe is not deterministic at the quantum level. There are no hidden variables. The randomness is real. God, it turns out, does play dice. But this leaves us with a profound mystery about what the wave function means, about what is actually happening before the measurement. And the various interpretations that different physicists have proposed, Copenhagen, many worlds, pilot wave, relational quantum mechanics, QBET, are not merely different ways of calculating the same thing. They are genuinely different accounts of reality. They disagree about whether the wave function is real or merely a mathematical tool, about whether measurement creates reality or merely reveals it, about whether the universe branches at every quantum event into multiple parallel histories or remains singular. These are questions about the deep nature of reality, and physicists are not agreed on the answers. What is agreed upon is this: the quantum world does not look like the world your brain presents to you. Particles do not have definite locations before they are looked at. Objects can be quantum entangled, correlated over arbitrary distances in ways that have no classical explanation, in ways that Einstein called spooky action at a distance, but which have been confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt. The universe, at its finest grain, is not made of the solid, locally determined, causally connected stuff that your intuition assumes. Your brain was not built to see this. Your brain was built to navigate a world of medium-sized objects moving at medium speeds, and it does this brilliantly. Stones and predators and food sources and other people, the brain excels at modeling this, but it was never designed to model quantum fields. And so when we descend to that level, our intuitions fail completely. We can calculate, we can predict with extraordinary accuracy the outcomes of quantum experiments, but we cannot picture what is happening. The mathematics works. The image refuses to cohere. The physicist Richard Feynman, perhaps the most brilliant explainer the physical sciences have ever produced, said this explicitly: anyone who claims to understand quantum mechanics does not understand quantum mechanics. He did not mean that it was incomprehensible. He meant that understanding in the way we understand everyday things, through mental pictures, through narrative, through the kind of spatial modeling our brains evolved for, is not available here. The quantum world is not a strange version of the familiar world. It is a different kind of thing entirely, accessible only through mathematics and the extremely indirect evidence of experiment. This is one of the most extraordinary facts about the human situation. We have, through the sheer ingenuity of mathematics and experiment, managed to probe a level of reality that our biology was never designed to perceive. We have used our brains, which are prediction machines built to navigate the Pleistocene savanna, to deduce the existence of a quantum realm that our brains are constitutionally unable to directly experience. We are standing at the edge of our own interface and peering past it, using tools of abstraction to see something our senses were never built to show us. That is either the greatest miracle of human cognition or the greatest demonstration of its limitation, depending on how you look at it. I think it is both. Now let me tell you something that I find personally among the most beautiful and most unsettling ideas in all of this. It concerns what happens at the border of experience, at the edges of consciousness, where the light of awareness dims and the constructed world begins to come apart. When you are under deep anesthesia, where are you? Not merely unconscious in the ordinary sense of sleep, where the brain continues to run its model, to dream, to consolidate memory, to regulate the body. Under certain depths of anesthesia, the EEG goes flat. The brain's characteristic patterns of correlated activity, the global synchrony, the long-range communication between regions that seems to accompany conscious experience, these disappear, and the patient reports nothing. Not darkness, not a sense of time passing, not even the awareness of absence. Nothing. And then the anesthesia is reversed, and in a fraction of a second, the lights come on. Consciousness returns, the world is there again. The constructed reality reassembles itself instantaneously from nothing. What is that boundary? What is the difference between the universe with your consciousness in it and the universe without? What flips when the anesthesia reverses and you go from absence to presence, from no world to world? We do not know. The neuroscientist Giulio Tononi has proposed a theory called integrated information theory, which attempts to quantify consciousness, to put a number on it, a measure of the integrated complexity of a system's causal structure, which he calls phi. Systems with high phi, like the human brain, have rich conscious experience. Systems with low phi, like a simple computer which processes information in highly modular ways without significant integration, have little or none. This is a testable mathematical proposal, and it makes some interesting predictions, including the prediction that consciousness might not be confined to biological brains, that any system with sufficiently high integrated causal complexity might have some degree of experience, that the universe at a fine enough grain might be saturated with something like experience. This view, called panpsychism, and it is not the fringe view some assume. It is seriously defended by serious philosophers including Galen Strawson, Philip Goff, and others, holds that experience is not something that emerges mysteriously from sufficiently complex matter, but that some form of experience is fundamental, that the hard problem of consciousness has a hard answer. Experience goes all the way down, not human experience, not anything like human experience, but some irreducible proto-experiential quality, infinitely simpler than perception, that is present wherever there is integrated causal structure. I do not know if this is true. No one does. But I find it a more honest response to the hard problem than the standard materialist assumption that experience simply emerges from complexity without further explanation. That at some point in the brain's organization, the lights just come on, and there is nothing more to be said about why. The emergent story, while it may be correct, does not explain, it labels. It says, consciousness emerges from complexity and then falls silent about how or why a physical process of any complexity would be accompanied by subjective experience at all. The panpsychist says perhaps it is accompanied by experience because experience is part of the fabric of reality, not added to it, not produced by it, woven into it. I want to tell you something now that perhaps you have not considered. That Alexandros, the shepherd who could not see the photograph, he was not cut off from reality. He was experiencing a different slice of it. The gray smudges on the paper, which were meaningless to him, were made of the same photons that carried the image to the journalist's eyes. The same photons, but one brain had learned to decode them as an image, and one had not. No brain is closer to the underlying reality than any other. The journalist and the shepherd were equally far from the truth. The journalist simply had a different interface, one that happened to include the symbolic medium of photography, which is, after all, not a natural perception, but a learned one. Children who have not been exposed to photographs must learn to see them in the same way Alexandros never had to. Every culture, every epoch, every individual has a slightly different interface. The medieval European who looked at the night sky and saw the fixed stars as points of light embedded in a crystalline sphere, and who heard in certain music the mathematical harmony of the spheres, that person was not simply ignorant of the truth. They were experiencing a rich, coherent, internally consistent model of the universe, shaped by their biology, their culture, their learning, their language. Just as we are, we have better instruments, we have more accumulated science, we can peek beneath our interface more effectively than they could. But we are still at the interface, still experiencing the translation, not the original. And there is something in this that I want to hold very carefully because it can be misused. It does not mean all models are equally good. They are not. The heliocentric model of the solar system is better than the geocentric one. Not merely different, better, more accurate, more predictive, more consistent with observation, more useful for navigation and for understanding how things actually work. Science is the project of improving the model, of making it more faithful to the underlying reality, of catching the brain's simplifications and correcting them. And it works, it demonstrably works. The planes fly, the drugs heal, the rockets reach their targets in the outer solar system with extraordinary precision. But science, even at its most successful, gives us better icons. Not raw reality. It gives us more accurate descriptions of the underlying computation, but those descriptions are still descriptions, still translated through the human mind, still shaped by the limitations and assumptions and perceptual apparatus of the people doing the science. Einstein's equations describe gravity more accurately than Newton's. But what is gravity? We know it curves space-time. We know how to calculate its effects with extraordinary precision. We do not know what it actually is in terms of some deeper theory. We do not know why it exists. We do not know how to reconcile it with quantum mechanics. The map is more detailed. The territory remains beyond the map. This is not a counsel of despair. It is a counsel of wonder. Because the alternative, the belief that we have already or are close to directly perceiving reality as it is a kind of cosmic arrogance that the history of science should have cured us of by now. Every generation has been sure that it stood near the end of knowledge, that the major questions were settled and only details remained. And every generation has been wrong, not because the scientists were stupid, but because reality is apparently deeper than any given level of inquiry. Every time we peel back a layer, there is another layer. Every time we think we have reached the foundation turns out to be standing on something else. What is the electron, really? What is a quark, really? What is a quantum field, really? The physicist's answer is a mathematical object whose behavior we can describe with extraordinary precision and whose nature we do not know. We know how the electron behaves. We do not know what the electron is. And if we do not know what the electron is, we do not know what the world is made of, not in the deepest sense. And if we do not know what the world is made of, we do not know what we are made of. And if we do not know what we are made of, we do not know what is doing the experiencing. This is not a failure. This is a frontier. And it is the most magnificent frontier the human mind has ever faced. It is the frontier at which consciousness encounters its own limits, at which the brain that evolved to survive the savannah finds itself attempting to understand the full depth of a universe that is perhaps not built on terms it can ever fully grasp. But it keeps trying. That is what I find most extraordinary of all. The human mind keeps trying. It built mathematics, it built physics, it built chemistry and neuroscience and cognitive science and philosophy of mind. It looked at the stars and calculated their distances, their compositions, their ages. It looked at itself and began to see how it works. It is now, at this moment in history, beginning to turn the full power of scientific inquiry on consciousness itself, on the very process by which it knows anything at all. We are standing right now at the beginning of what will perhaps be the most significant scientific revolution in human history. Not in physics, not in biology, but in the science of mind. The questions of what consciousness is, how it arises, whether it is fundamental or emergent, what the relationship is between the physical brain and subjective experience, these are questions that serious scientists and philosophers are pursuing with serious tools, with testable hypotheses, with experimental methodologies that did not exist a generation ago. We will not solve these questions quickly. We may not solve them at all in any way a human mind could fully grasp. But we are, for the first time, asking them rigorously. And what drives that inquiry, what has always driven every great leap of human understanding, is the willingness to be genuinely, radically uncertain. To look at what we think we know, the solidity of matter, the redness of red, the flow of time, the reliability of our senses, and ask, is this really what it seems? Alexandros, the shepherd, holding the photograph and seeing nothing, taught us something important without intending to. He taught us that the experience of perception, the feeling of directly seeing the world, does not guarantee that you are actually seeing the world. The experience of directness is part of the interface. The certainty of vision is built into the software. The conviction that you are touching the real is generated by the same system that generates the touch. And once you understand that, once it is no longer an abstract philosophical proposition, but a lived, felt recognition, the world does not disappear, it does not become less, it does not dissolve into meaninglessness, quite the opposite. It becomes more, because you begin to see it for what it actually is, a mystery, a profound, inexhaustible, almost certainly bottomless mystery, to which your brain is giving you access through the most extraordinary instrument the universe has so far produced, and through an instrument that is, at the same time, magnificently limited and magnificently wrong about what it is showing you. The tension between those two things, the extraordinary power and the profound limitation, is, I think, the central drama of the human intellectual condition. We are beings who can understand that our understanding is incomplete, who can know that our knowledge is bounded, who can step back from the experience of the world and ask, what is this experience really? What is this knowing? What is the thing that is asking? That recursive capacity, the mind turning on itself, the eye trying to see the eye, is either the most elegant feature of the universe or its greatest irony, and I strongly suspect it is both. There is a pale blue dot hanging in the darkness of the solar system, as seen from the outer reaches of our planetary neighborhood. Carl Sagan wrote about it. I want to write about the mind that looks at it. Because when the Voyager spacecraft turned its camera back toward the inner solar system and captured the image of Earth as a fraction of a pixel, a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam, the reaction of every human who has ever seen that image was not detachment. It was not indifference. It was something like love, vertigo and love, the recognition of smallness and the intensification of meaning. The universe is vast and we are tiny, and yet the tiny beings are the ones doing the measuring. The tiny beings are the ones who found the vastness. The universe looked at itself through us, and what it saw, what we saw, was beauty. That seeing is the constructed hallucination of a biological brain on a small rock. It is also simultaneously the most significant thing that has ever happened in the 4 billion year history of life on this planet. Both of those things are true. The seeing is limited and it is also transcendent. The model is wrong about the deep nature of reality, and it is also the only instrument we have for discovering how wrong it is. We are the universe's way of being confused about itself. And somehow, out of that confusion, we have built telescopes and symphonies and hospitals and theorems and poems. Out of the controlled hallucination of conscious experience, we have managed to partially correct it, to see through our own construction to something, some fragment of the thing beneath. That is not nothing. That is extraordinary. That is perhaps the most extraordinary thing I know. The original reality, the one your brain replaced with its careful, elegant, evolutionarily optimized translation, is not somewhere you can go. You cannot step outside your own perception. You cannot turn off the model and access the raw data. There is no trapdoor in consciousness through which you can drop into unmediated reality. You are always already inside the construction. But you can know that you are inside it, and knowing that changes everything. It makes you hold your certainties more lightly. It makes you more curious and less defensive. It makes the strangeness of existence more available to you, the strangeness that is always there, beneath the familiar surface of the world, quietly waiting for you to notice that nothing is quite what it seems. The universe is older and stranger and deeper and more silent and more vibrant and more empty and more full than the brain's interface will ever show you. The colors are invented, the sounds are constructed, the solidity is electromagnetic illusion, time is edited and delivered late, and yet the invention is magnificent, the construction is staggering, the illusion holds the warmth of every person you have ever loved, the weight of every grief you have ever carried, the taste of every meal that ever mattered, the particular quality of afternoon light in a room where you were happy. It is not the truth, but it is your truth. The only truth your kind of being gets to have. And if you are very lucky and very careful and willing to be wrong, if you are willing to live inside the mystery with your eyes genuinely open, you might catch, now and then, a glimpse of something the interface was not designed to show you. A moment when the model falters and the underlying strangeness bleeds through, when the word for the color dissolves and there is only the light, when the name of the person you love becomes momentarily inadequate and there is only the fact of them, when the familiar room you wake in feels for just a second profoundly alien, like a set for a play you did not write, built by a mind you did not choose, performing a version of reality that is partial and temporary and irreplaceable. Those moments are not failures of perception. They are its greatest achievements. They are the moments when the brain, briefly, knows what it is. We are not observers of reality. We are its temporary, partial, beautiful, astonished translators. And the original, the thing we are translating from, is still out there. Patient, unchanged, waiting in the dark and the silence and the dimensionless quantum probability for a kind of mind that might someday, somehow begin to see it whole. We have not arrived, we have barely begun, and that open, living, urgent incompleteness is perhaps the most hopeful thing about us.